and he appeared to be in a confused state. Paramedics arrived on the scene, followed closely by 3 members of the Milwaukee Police Department. They were met by a tall, blond man who identified himself as Jeffrey Dahmer. The naked boy, Dahmer claimed, was his 19-year-old lover. He explained the boy's incoherence by saying they had been drinking, adding that his lover had wandered off while he was out buying more beer. The officers accompanied Dahmer and the boy back to the apartment. There they found photos of the boy in his underwear. The teenager was made to sit on the couch next to his folded clothing. Against the boy's objection, he was left in the care of Dahmer. The police then left the apartment, a flat later described as well-kept and neat, though it did have an unpleasant odor. The boy they left behind wasn't 19, as Dahmer had claimed, but a 14-year-old named Kolnerik Synthosimone. He was anything but Dahmer's lover. In the hours following Synthosimone's return, courtesy of the Milwaukee police, Dahmer strangled and dismembered the boy, but not before having sex with his corpse. His skull was kept as a souvenir. Dahmer would later provide an explanation for the boy's confused state by revealing that he had drilled a hole in the teenager's skull. 4 more young men would share similar fates, all at the hands of the tall, blond man who, within 2 months, will become one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. Dahmer was born in Milwaukee on 21 May 1960. Very much a wanted child, he began life as a happy, very slightly sickly boy. His personality dampened somewhat at the age of 6 after he underwent an operation for a double hernia. That same year, the family relocated to Ohio, a move which troubled Dahmer. He developed a dislike of the new and unfamiliar, while at the same time became increasingly withdrawn and uncommunicative. He was incapable of maintaining friendships and preferred to be alone. Much of his time, it was later discovered, was spent on a secret animal cemetery. He had created this from roadkill found when cycling around the community. The centerpiece was a dog's head he had mounted on a stake. The dedication and hard work Dahmer put into his cemetery was absent from other areas of his life. An intelligent teenager, lacking in motivation, he achieved nothing more than average grades and began to drink. When he was 18 years old, his parents divorced. Following years of tension and acrimony, the decision could not come as a surprise. There followed a bitter custody battle over his sibling, a young brother named David. Dahmer committed his first murder in June of 1978, the same month in which he graduated from high school. The victim was a 19-year-old named Stephen Hicks, a hitchhiker whom Dahmer had spotted while driving. The two returned to the Dahmer home, where they drank beer and had sex. When Hicks expressed his wish to leave, Dahmer, unable to bear the thought of being left alone, killed the hitchhiker by striking him with a barbell. He then cut up the body, placed it in rubbish bags, and buried it in the woods behind his house, adjacent to his pet cemetery. Years later, he would dig up Hicks' corpse, pound it with a sledgehammer, and scatter the remains. His son soon remarried and, with his new wife, encouraged Dahmer to enroll in Ohio State University. He spent his only term there drinking. His father then laid down the law, telling his eldest son that he could either get a job or join the army. Continuing to drink, making no attempt to seek employment, in January 1979, Dahmer was driven to a recruiting office. He was enlisted to serve a 6-year stint in the United States Army. Interestingly, he appeared to take to life in the military, at least initially. But after 2 years, he was discharged, owing to his excessive drinking. After a few months in Florida, he returned to his family in Ohio. Arrested for drunkenness and disorderly conduct, in 1982, he was sent off to live with his grandmother in Wisconsin. His troubles with the law only escalated. In August, Dahmer was charged with public exposure after drunkenly dropping his pants at a Wisconsin state fair. 4 years later, in September 1986, he was arrested for masturbating before 2 boys and was put on probation for 1 year. The following September, he committed his second known murder, killing 26-year-old Stephen Toomey, with whom he had been drinking in a gay bar. Using a large suitcase, Dahmer managed to move Toomey's body from the scene of the crime a hotel room, to his grandmother's basement. There he used the corpse for a variety of sex acts before dismembering and disposing of it in the trash. The next month, he killed Jamie Dockstader, a 14-year-old boy who was seen frequently outside various gay nightclubs. In March 1988, he struck again, murdering Richard Guerrero, a 26-year-old who Dahmer claimed he met in a gay bar. On 25 September 1988, Dahmer moved out of his grandmother's house and into an apartment in Milwaukee. The very next day, he offered a 13-year-old boy $50 to pose for some photographs. The boy went to Dahmer's new home, where he was drugged and fondled. The crime was discovered after the teenager's parents, concerned as to his state, took him to the hospital, where it was confirmed that their son had been drugged. Dahmer was arrested while at his job, working as a mixer for Ambrosia Chocolate Company. Dahmer returned to his grandmother's house to await trial. In February, he met a 24-year-old aspiring model, Anthony Sears, and brought him back to the house to pose for photographs. Instead, Dahmer drugged and strangled Sears. He then had sex with the corpse, dismembered it, and placed the head in boiling water. Once he had managed to remove the skull, he painted it so that those who might see a souvenir would think it was plastic. For Dahmer's assault on the 13-year-old boy, he was sentenced to 1 year of work release, under which he was permitted to work during the day so long as he returned to prison each evening. Though he pleaded guilty, Dahmer claimed in his defense that he had thought the boy was much older than 13. In an awful coincidence, Dahmer's victim was the brother of Konrad Sinetzelman, whom he would murder less than 2 years later. Dahmer served 10 months of his sentence before being let out early for good behavior. A letter from Dahmer's father, urging that his son not be released until he had received treatment, was ignored. He was registered as a sex offender and began what was intended to be a 5-year term of probation. After a couple of months in his grandmother's house, on 14 May 1990, Dahmer moved into his own flat in a complex called the Oxford Apartments. The following month, he committed his 6th murder. He killed again in July and twice in September. There was then a 5-month gap. His first murder of 1991 wasn't committed until February. A 19-year-old named Errol Lindsay was killed in April before Dahmer began the spree that would lead to his capture. Many saw 2 more victims. May saw, the second being Konrad Sinetzelman. Then on 30 June 1991, beginning with the killing of a man named Matt Turner, Dahmer began a string of murders averaging 1 every 5 days. Jeremiah Weinberger on 5 July, Oliver Lacey on 12 July, and Joseph Braderholt on 19 July. He experimented with various methods in disposing of the bodies, using a variety of acids and chemicals. The resulting sludge Dahmer poured down the drain or flushed down the toilet. He ate the flesh of selected victims and would often keep 1 or 2 body parts, usually the skull and genitals. Neighbors began to complain about the vile smell coming from Dahmer's apartment. When confronted, he offered a variety of explanations, including spoiled meat and a dirty aquarium. The sounds of sawing were also heard. It was observed that stray cats swarmed whenever he threw anything in the dustpan. Yet it wasn't the complaints of his fellow residents that brought the killing to an end. It was Dahmer's next intended victim. On 22 July 1991, police spotted a short, athletic man named Tracy Edwards running with handcuffs dangling from one hand. Assuming he'd somehow escaped police custody, they confronted him and were told that he had escaped a man who had threatened his life. He led the police back to Dahmer's apartment. The horror of Dahmer's secret life was finally exposed. Eventually charged with 15 counts of murder, Dahmer's trial began the next summer. Such was the nature of his crimes that the authorities felt it unnecessary to charge him with the attempted murder of Tracy Edwards. Initially, Dahmer pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Then, against the wishes of his attorney, he changed his plea to guilty, while maintaining his claim of insanity. In the end, the jury found him to be both guilty and sane. He was sentenced to 15 life terms, a total of 937 years in prison. In a statement made before the court, Dahmer expresses remorse for the killings, adding that he wished for his own death. Dahmer's wish came true on 28 November 1994 when he and a fellow inmate were beaten to death by a 3rd prisoner, Christopher Scarver. After the horrors within the walls of Oxford Apartments were revealed, John Balzerzak and Joseph Gabrish, two of the officers who had returned Koenig's Smith saxophone to Dahmer, came in for a great deal of criticism. Had they bothered to run a background check on Dahmer's name, they would have learned he was a convicted child molester who was still on probation. Had they bothered to investigate the unpleasant odor in the flat, they would have discovered the body of Tony Hughes, 3 days dead, decomposing in Dahmer's bed. An audio tape in which Balzerzak and Gabrish could be heard after the incident, laughing and making homophobic statements, was made public. A witness to the scene played out on the street that early morning in May left a message for the officers after seeing a photograph of the missing boy in a local paper. They failed to return their call. In 1991, Balzerzak and Gabrish were fired from the Milwaukee Police Department. On appeal, they were reinstated with back pay. In 2005, Balzerzak was elected president of the Milwaukee Police Association.